From time to time, we find ourselves in the judgment seat of God. Not that we are judging other people, but that we are judging God himself. We like to think of ourselves that perhaps we've got things figured out and perhaps God has messed up. We say, well, no, that's not how we are better than theology. We know better than that. There are things clear. We certainly wouldn't do that because God is God. We would not think that way. We would not even presume to do such a thing. Yet people do this all the time. There's doctrines, for example, that we don't like. There's doctrines which we are uncomfortable with. There are many Christians, for example, who are very uncomfortable with the doctrine of hell, for example. I don't know if I care for that so much, and so that people go ahead and try to avoid a conversation about that particular topic, or they don't want to talk about it very much, or perhaps they say, well, maybe God doesn't mean that, or perhaps when all is said and done, God's got it all figured out, and so we'll just ignore that completely. We see that. But then some of you are like, well, I would never go ahead and do that. But I'm here to tell you that things happen in your lives, and when some of those things happen in your lives, then all of a sudden you're saying, in my practical daily life and the way that I respond to that particular tragedy in my life, maybe I don't truly believe in the sovereignty of God. Tragedy has happened. Something terrible has happened. And in our minds, we're saying, well, God is sovereign. I understand that from my theology and from my church. I understand that from the Bible. But at the same time, I'm going to say, how in the world can God allow that to happen? That doesn't seem very fair to me. If there's a loving God in this world, I don't know how he could allow that particular thing to happen. And so where beforehand, in our academic sense, we would not challenge the sovereignty of God or who God is, when tragedy oftentimes hits our lives, especially initially, we're saying, God, where are you at? Or how could you allow that to happen? Or I don't get that. Perhaps I don't understand you very well, or perhaps you don't have as much control as I thought once upon a time. That's where we're at sometimes. It is. And you're saying, well, yeah, maybe a pagan would think that way. Folks, Christians think this way all the time. Believers who would say that they're a follower of Jesus, when things hit the fan, if you will, when things go bad, then all of a sudden they say, well, I don't know if I can trust. I have a hard time with that. More and more, I've come to the conclusion that God will allow us to go through those hard times. And sometimes as we go through those hard times, those testings, if you will, it is those times where even though we may not fully understand things, we are still called to trust in him. But that's hard. So you say to yourself, well, what are we supposed to do then when difficulties hit our lives and things are really, really rough? Are we supposed to just live life and sort of just take it? Is that what we are supposed to do? I don't want to say this. I don't want us to say, okay, well, we're supposed to understand God's in control, so we're never to complain. Because I can open up Scripture and I open it up to the Psalms and I see the book of Lamentations, and I see Jeremiah, and Jeremiah says, I don't get it. And he is crying and he is weeping aloud. Oh, that my head were as a fount, that I might cry. We have the Psalms of David, and David is saying, oh my goodness, I don't get it. I don't get it. And the reality, as you live this life, you're going to have things which take place in your life, and you're going to say, I don't get it, God. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I read things, but I don't understand how this is allowed. I don't get this. We might be frustrated. We may be sad. We may be devastated. And sometimes we're going to put ourselves up upon a perch and we judge God. But that's not our role, believe it or not. I don't think God is offended when you come to God and you say, God, I don't get it. I don't think it's wrong to go ahead and say, God, I don't get it. But I think it is wrong when we go ahead and say, I don't get it and I don't trust you anymore. I think ultimately we have to come to a point where we say, I don't understand, and I don't understand completely, but I will trust in you. Ultimately, we must come back to the point, where will we put our trust? Well, we come now to a new chapter in Luke, Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14 is one which is an interesting beginning to the passage. We have Jesus, and we find Jesus at a dinner party. Here comes Jesus to a dinner party For much of the chapter, we are at the same dinner party, verses 1 through, oh my goodness, I think it's all the way through 24. We will not go all the way through that today because it's too long. But we will look at the first 11 verses this morning. So we'll divide the dinner party into two. We get the appetizer and the main course. And then after that, I guess we get the dessert. Okay, that's what we get next week. But as we come this morning, we look at this passage here. We look at the first 11 verses, divided into two different pieces. And what we'll see here is we're going to see that Jesus, the God-man, here he is the one who is to show the people what is God like. We see this many times. For example, Jesus, we are told in the prologue of John, in John chapter 1 and verse 18, no man has seen God, but the only begotten God. He is the one who is going to make him manifest, or he's the one who is going to exegete him. He's going to make him known. This is what Jesus' job is. What is God like? Jesus will show us. You get it in John chapter 14. John chapter 14 and verse 8. You get Philip, and Philip says, simply show us the Father, and that is enough. And Jesus will say to Philip, have I been with you so long that you do not know who I am? If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Meaning Jesus is showing what it looks like, or showing what God, who God is. If you look at Jesus, you say, oh, okay, that's what God looks like, in a sense. So that's what we have. But here we have Jesus, and Jesus is coming to the dinner party. Wouldn't it be a marvelous thing if you have the God-man come to your dinner party? I'd come. Okay, all right, Frank, fantastic. So we're all very excited, okay? Here's the problem, though. At this particular dinner party, we have mankind who's decided what they've decided to do is that they have decided to set themselves up and to make themselves the judges of the God-man. Here we have it. The creation is going to go ahead, whether they understand, well, surely they don't understand, they're going to go ahead and set themselves up, the creation, to go ahead and to observe and condemn the Creator. That's what they're there for. And all of this is done with an intent and a purpose, because they want to set themselves up in the seat of God, not understanding that they're trying to judge God. Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14, we find a dinner party which Jesus is going to go to, and it's designed to be, at the very beginning, to be a trap. One Sabbath, he went to dine. That's Jesus went to dine at the house of a ruler of the Pharisees. Again, we're a little surprised because here the Pharisees are mentioned again. If you go all the way back into chapter 13, remember that chapter 13 started off that Jesus was being told, hey, watch out because Herod the fox is going to, or Herod is trying to go ahead and get you. And the Pharisees are sort of giving Jesus a word. Okay, but here we have the Pharisees, and again, we have a ruler of the Pharisees, and he's invited Jesus to dinner. So the Pharisees are not completely cast out, not quite yet. One Sabbath, when he went to dine at the house of a ruler of the Pharisees, they were watching him carefully. And so we have here an interesting situation. Here comes Jesus. He comes to a ruler of the Pharisees. The Pharisees are almost always in a bad light, with perhaps the exception of chapter 13. You get the one section where they're saying, avoid Herod. But now we come and we see it is a ruler of the Pharisees, and these guys are almost always in a bad light, even more so. And we have this ruler. We notice as well these words here. They were watching him carefully. Have you ever had a dinner party where you have the party so that you might watch your guests carefully, that you might catch them? I don't tend to do that. If you come to our house, we don't watch you carefully so that we can trick you. Truly. I'm scared to go to the pastor's house for dinner. Don't be scared. We're okay. We will not watch you carefully to go ahead and to catch you on something, but this is what these guys are doing. These are guys here who have great abilities. They have great thinking. They have great studies. And yet here they are, and they're looking at Jesus, and they're watching him carefully. Now, why are they watching him carefully? Because they have a plant there. They have a man. This is another thing which is strange, too, because here you have this formal dinner, and you have a man who is brought in, which normally they would have excluded, but here he is included. And it says, and behold, there was a man before him who had dropsy. So he has a swelling, okay? That's what he's got, okay? Perhaps he's got joints which are swollen. Perhaps it's just his skin is super tight. Perhaps his legs are large, but he's clearly a person who's not doing well physically. If you're going to have a guest of honor come on in, you probably are not going to have this guy in as well. But they do. They have him there because they want this guy who is physically shown that he's got a problem, and they want him before Jesus because they want to see what Jesus will do on the Sabbath. Now, this is interesting. Again, Luke, this is the third time that we have seen a Sabbath healing is going to take place. Okay? So Luke, 3 different times, okay? Chapter 6, chapter 13, we just saw it not too long ago, and now in chapter 14, we're going to see that there are 3 Sabbath healings. We're going to go look at those real quick because we have a little bit of time today. So I want us to go to Luke chapter 6. They're very, very similar, and the reactions are very, very similar. Luke chapter 6, go into verse 6. And Luke chapter 6, starting in verse 6, on the Sabbath, there it is. On the Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and he was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was withered. Once again, we don't see that it's an incredibly bad disease, but it's certainly an inconvenience, just like the man who has the swelling. He sees a man, he has a withered hand, and the scribes and the Pharisees, look at this, they are watching. They watched him to see whether he would heal on the Sabbath. So once again, what we have is we have religious leadership, which is watching to see if Jesus will fall into. Now, I think the dinner is a trap. This one here has an occasion where they see it's taking place. But I think the one in 14 is actually a bit of a quote-unquote trap. So that they might find a reason to accuse him. But he knew their thoughts. And he said to the man with the withered hand, come and stand here. And he rose and he stood there. And Jesus said to them, I ask you, plural people, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save a life or destroy it? And after looking around at them, all had to say, all he said to him, stretch out your hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored, but they were filled with fury. And so once again, we have this situation where we have the Sabbath. We've got a man with a withered hand, and Jesus says, can you do good on the Sabbath? And they're saying not much of anything. And Jesus heals him. Boom. Jesus says, yes, you can. Watch this. But not only that, we go to chapter 13. Not close to our passage, but in 13 and verse 10. We saw this not too long ago, if you've been with me. He's teaching once again in the synagogue. He sees a woman with a disabling spirit. It says she's bent over. She is having a pretty bad life, quite frankly. She was bent over and could not fully straighten herself. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said to her, woman, you're free from your disability. And when he laid hands on her, and immediately she was made straight, and she glorified God. But the rulers of the synagogue, indignant about Jesus, because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, and said to the people, there are 6 days in which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day. And Jesus said, you hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his donkey and his ox, and lead them away and to make sure that they're taken care of? And here, this woman here, she is tied up with a satanic oppression, and you loose your oxen, you loose your donkey. I have loosed a daughter of Abraham. Here she is, a special woman, a woman with a royal background in many respects, and I have loosed her on God's day, on the Sabbath day. That's a marvelous thing. And you're telling these people to come back on another day? You're telling her to go away for another day? You're telling me that I'm wrong? You are in the judgment place of God? That's who you are? And the answer to them is, yes, we are. We're in the judgment place of God. So we come to the 14th chapter then, and this is the third one. We have the man with the swelling, and Jesus once again is going to go ahead and he's going to heal. And Jesus responded to the lawyers and Pharisees saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? Which is it, guys? They don't respond. You would expect them to be so confident that they would respond. No, it's not. But they don't respond because they are hoping that he will go ahead and cross a line and actually go ahead and heal so that they can accuse him. But they remained silent. Then he took him and he healed him and he sent him away. And he says very similar words to which he said in chapter 13. Which of you, having a son or an ox that has fallen into a well on Sabbath day, will not immediately pull him out? And they could not reply to these things. He says, you're kidding, right? You have an animal. and it falls into a well, and you would go ahead and you would work hard to go ahead and pull this animal out. It is suffering. It is not doing well. You don't want to have that financial loss. And yet you would do it, of course. And here, once again, I see people around me who are struggling and having difficulty, and I am curing them on the Sabbath, which is God's day. And you have a problem with it? What's the reason of the Sabbath? The Sabbath, yeah, it's a day of rest in the Jewish mentality or in the Jewish law. It's a day of rest, but the day of rest is one where you can go ahead and say, I'm not going to go to work. I'm not going to be involved in sales. I'm not going to do all the stuff that I normally do, because this is a day where I get to go ahead and focus in upon the goodness of God and what God has done and how great God is. And here God himself, God in flesh, has come, and they're saying, you're doing it wrong. You have not been called, ladies and gentlemen. I have not been called to go ahead and to study and to put God in the docket, to go ahead and to say, God, I'm going to go ahead and judge you. He knows the right thing to do. But here you have these people, and they're saying, no, we're going to judge you. Mistake. I like what the New American Commentary says about this particular section here. It says, here are these people who are so full of themselves, okay? They are so full of themselves that they think they are so good that they are not willing to repent. And here are these people, it is very similar to that conclusion you get in verse 34 of chapter 13. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it, how often I was willing to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. I am willing, but you are not willing, because you are so stuck with your prejudices, with your wrong theological thoughts, that you are not willing to come underneath me. Instead, what you want is you want to think of you as the master, and you want to judge God. And I'm here to tell you, folks, sometimes we would never say that I'm here to judge God, but when things happen in our lives, those things are so terrible, we want to go ahead and look at God and say, God, how dare you? And I'm here to tell you, you're wrong. I'm here to tell you that at times when I question the goodness of God or his ability, I am wrong. And I need to get myself back into my place and say, my God, I don't understand. And I am saddened completely, but I trust in you. So here we have an incredible breach of etiquette at the dinner, right? Here we have these guys, they brought in a plant so that they can test Jesus. And Jesus says, okay, well, since you've brought a man here, let's go ahead and talk a little bit. I might as well go ahead and use this as an opportunity to teach. You guys have brought a man who is suffering, being desirous that he'd stay in his suffering, or that I heal him on a day which you don't approve of, and therefore you can accuse me. That's the two options which we have. You're the teachers? You're the godly ones? I don't think so. But here we come. So Jesus says, let me give you a parable. Here we go. He says, now he told a parable Now he told a parable to those who were invited when he noticed how they chose the places of honor, saying, we'll leave it there. It is important in this life to know who you're talking to. Okay? They've invited Jesus, the God-man, but they consider him a false prophet. You better know who you're talking to before you make certain discussions and you make certain decisions. When I was 19 years old, I worked at a McDonald's on the Ave, University of Washington. And there was a guy, I guess he was my manager. He wasn't the store manager, but he was a level below. And it was not a very good McDonald's, okay? I dealt with drug addicts all the time, drug dealing all the time, homeless people all the time. Oh my goodness, I have so many stories. Police chases in the restaurant, that was always interesting. That was really interesting. Gang activity, yeah, that was an interesting one, yeah. No, I'm not going to tell you that story, but it's fun. So we'd have all of these things that would take place. And the one manager, he was there, and he was managing one night. I wasn't there that particular night. And a woman came in, and she saw him. She says, "Hey, how do you like your job?" And he said, "Let me tell you about my job. This franchise here, owned by an old fat guy, kind of an Italian slob." "Really?" "Yeah. I mean, it's not a very good job, and the guy's kind of a jerk." It's important to know who you're talking to before you say certain things. Turns out that the fat Italian slob, his sister, was the one that was asking the questions. That was a day before I went to work, so I went in the next day. I hadn't worked that particular day. Went in there and I said, "Where's such and such, the manager?" And they said, "Oh, he was no longer employed at that particular location or any location. He was gone." You got to know who you're talking to. It's important. I got the old example of Dr. Phil Williams. He used to be the pastor of this church once upon a time. Dr. Williams had his PhD in Latin and in Greek, okay? I remember taking Greek classes from Dr. Williams. They'd have those overheads, you know, remember the old days with the overheads? And he'd have the Greek thing in there, and he'd have a little stick, and he'd point. Now, this word here, bum, 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 and he'd read the Greek just like you and I can read English, to which we are all just amazed, right? Oh my goodness, you know? And he'd look at you because you didn't understand things, and he'd look at you like, "Why are you stupid?" I mean, it was a very nice man, and even his insults came off as nice. But is this this little short guy with a big brain. And there was Dr. Williams, and he had a Jehovah's Witness come to his door one day, and it was trying to talk to Dr. Williams about how John 1, for example, was not, talked about, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was a God, and mistranslating the Bible. And Dr. Williams says, "Well, that's not how you translate." They said, "Yes, it is, in the Greek." And he says, "Oh, you have a background in Greek?" "Oh, yes." He says, "Oh." And he handed him his Greek New Testament. He says, "Could you show me where that's at?" And he took the Bible from him, holding it upside down, and saying, "I can't find it here right now, but I'm sure it's here." It's a good idea to know who you're talking to before you start talking. So here's Jesus, the dinner guest, the God-man. Here he comes. And here he is now, and he's beginning to start his parable. Now, he told a parable of those who were invited, and when he noticed how they chose the place of honor, saying to them, stop again. Here he is. He's going to teach a parable. These people are trying to get to the best places. Question, ready? What's the best place? The best place is to be next to the host, is it not? Where are the people trying to get to be the best place? The ruler of the Pharisee, the one who invited them. Which means that they are not trying to get next to Jesus. Isn't this fascinating? It's a good idea to know who you're talking to or who you're having dinner with. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to cozy up to the leader of the Pharisees because he's the host. He is the one who is awesome. So we're going to go ahead and get cozy to him. And Jesus is over here. Oh, just the God-man. Just the one who has got the designed task of showing people what God is like. They're not trying to get near Jesus. They're trying to get, in a sense, away from Jesus. When you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in a place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you, like me, be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, "Give your place to this person," and then you'll begin, you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. He says you got to know where you're supposed to be. You guys have a misunderstanding of where you are at and where I am at in the social sphere of things. Now, we live here in the Pacific Northwest. We don't have a whole lot of of even informal courtesy as to where people are at. I try to think of what we'd have that. If there was a wedding, for example, almost always, even in today's world, weddings, the first couple of rows are for family, correct? That still works, okay? But but even the bride side and the groom side is not really even held to as much as it used to be. It's just not, okay? And so usually when people come, we don't worry about place and location so much in the Pacific Northwest, okay? Except for maybe at a wedding and only for the first couple of rows. But that is not the case here. In this case here, where you're sitting is a very, very big idea. When we lived in Africa, where you sat was important because it was a classed society. You're like, oh, really? Yes. I remember we went to a wedding and we went there, we were brand new, so we weren't important. But our partner was not brand new. He'd been in the country for over 20 years. Everybody knew who he was. And we came and we sat towards the back. And we had people come up to him and take him by the arm and take him all the way to the front. And he sat in one of the padded chairs all the way in the front so that everybody could see him. Now, I will tell you the truth. I could not have been more happy because you do not want to be sitting in an African wedding, which goes on and on and on and on and on. The poor bride and groom oftentimes are kept up overnight. They have big giant celebrations. They put them in like a lazy boy chair. I don't know where they got the lazy boy chairs, but they find something like a lazy boy chair because that's the seat of honor. The bride and groom sit there in these cozy chairs, something that's cozier than they've ever been in their entire life, at their wedding, trying desperately to stay awake. Nothing says a wedding like falling asleep. Okay. All right, that's an aside. But here they are, and they're trying to figure out, where to put people. Okay, and Jesus is saying, you need to know your role, your position, and right now what you're doing is you're trying to monkey around, and you're trying to get to the place of honor, which is not honorable. You're trying to get close to the guy who doesn't know what he's talking about. I do. I'm the one, by the way, who just healed a man right in front of you. And you want to get near him? And I've done it before, and I've done it before. And I can guarantee you this, he's done it before. Luke only records 3, but there are other times almost surely. Jesus is provoking them, wanting them to ask the question, what in the world is going on here? Because ultimately what Jesus is looking at in verses 7 through 11, he is saying, listen, you need to know who you are talking about. You need to know who is around you. But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place. And when your host comes and says to you, friend, move up to the higher, then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. Look at verse 11, and this is the key to the point. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. It says, this is the deal, guys. You need to understand your place, your position. Okay? You don't make it up yourself. Okay? You guys are trying to get in close to this guy, and he's not worthy. You should be getting close to me. I'm the God man. I'm the one. God is the one, ladies and gentlemen, who will elevate us if we need to be elevated. And there are times in our lives, sometimes we will question God and say, God, I don't understand it. I would like to go ahead and to have a higher place, or I'd like to be in charge here, or I want to do this. And I don't think it's fair, and perhaps you have it wrong, and I'm going to judge you, and you're wrong. And when I do this, I am wrong. There are times, believe it or not, church work is not always an easy work. Some of you are like, you only work on Sunday morning, Pastor. We know that. I hate that little joke, by the way. Yeah. Just so you know. It is difficult, though, when you're working and you're working hard and you're thinking, I think things should be progressing and things are going, and things don't always go very well, and you get kind of bummed out. Okay? Pastors get bummed out. I guess Charles Spurgeon got bummed out and had problems with depression. So therefore, at times, I get depressed a little bit. Like, man alive, where is such and such at? When you're not here, by the way, I know when you're not here. I know everybody's name here, and I know when you miss church. And when you're not here, We can have 98% attendance, and I get bummed out because you're not here. Because I know. You're like, nope, I know. You want me to go through the list of who's not here? No, I won't do that right now. But I know. Oh, where are they? Oh, where are they at? Oh, where are they at? Where are they at? And for me, it's I get kind of bummed out. Oh, why aren't they here? Or Lord, why don't you grow us so much that, and why doesn't a building fall from the sky so that it's here? Wouldn't that be a great thing? Lord, it doesn't seem fair, but it seems like our church is working hard. It doesn't seem like things are going the way that they should be. And that's not the right answer. It's not even the right question. The question is, are you being faithful where you're at? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And God's going to take care of the rest of it. Okay. If God wants our church, for example, if he wants it to change and grow and big giant, then God's going to be in charge of that, and that's good. It means nothing if our church grows and it's not faithful. It's the faithfulness first, to do that first. And then as God blesses, then God blesses. Hallelujah for that. But it's not for us to go ahead and to put ourselves up on a platform and judge God and say, God, you're doing it wrong. Because he doesn't do it wrong. We have the Pharisees here, and the Pharisees go ahead and they say, Jesus, why don't you come to a dinner so that we can go ahead and we can judge you. That's what we want to do. We want to see what you have done wrong. That is, you're going to break the law in our opinion, and that you're going to heal a person. To which Jesus says, you guys don't have any idea what you're talking about. You don't even understand the purpose of the Sabbath, because the Sabbath is for the worship of God, for the blessing of mankind, not to hurt mankind. Are you crazy? You treat animals better than the daughter of Abraham, or as a man who is having a withered hand, or a man who has dropsy. Are you kidding me? You don't know what you're talking about. Further, I'm going to tell you this. Let me tell you about a parable. You better understand who you're dealing with. And you don't understand who you're dealing with when it comes to me. You are more interested in the things of this world, the religiosity and the honor which goes with him, rather than the Son of God. Could you imagine in eternity realizing I had the opportunity to cozy up with Jesus? Instead, I went ahead and I cozied up with that guy. Oops. Folks, let us be a people who, if you will, cozy up to the Christ, who get close to him, to appreciate who he is, and trust him even in the times when there are difficulties, because there are difficulties in this world. And there are times when we say, God, I don't get it. I don't know what to do. And I don't think God says, I don't want to hear your doubts. I don't think God says, I don't want to stop complaining to me. I think God, what he wants us to do is he wants us to go ahead and say, tell me your issues, but then I want you to trust me. You've got to come back to the point where you understand that I am God and that I'm in control. Over and over again, we see in the gospel accounts, there is this call to the people. Do you understand who Jesus is? I mean, Jesus will go ahead and he will heal people. He gets their attention. Who do you think I am? You have Jesus will ask, who do people say that I am? And they'll say, well, some say this, some say this. Peter will say, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. Hallelujah. You'll have Jesus, and he'll stop the waves and the wind on the ocean, and people, and even the disciples at the time, who is this again? Jesus wants us to understand who we're dealing with. Folks, you're dealing with the God-man. You're dealing with the Son of God. Worship him. Don't make him the target of your judgment. Make him the director of your life, and follow him. And even in the times where you have a theological debate or a practical debate or whatever it may be, yes, I will trust him. Yes, I will trust him. Amen.